It's midnight. You're somewhere in the African savannah, 100,000 years ago. There are no walls, no locks, no modern security. Just an open sky, tall grass, and the very real sound of something massive moving in the dark. You don't have a cave to hide in. In fact, you've never even seen a cave, so how do you close your eyes and fall asleep without becoming something else's breakfast? Let's start by destroying the biggest lie in human history, the caveman. The word itself implies that for millions of years, our primary real estate strategy was finding a hole in a rock and sitting in it. It's a great image for cartoons. It is completely, biologically, and mathematically absurd. First of all, caves are rare, like geographically extremely rare. If you look at the African Rift Valley, the cradle of human evolution, where our species spent the overwhelming majority of its existence, there are almost no habitable caves. It is vast, open, endless grassland and savanna. You could walk for hundreds of miles and never see a rock formation big enough to hide a dog, let alone an entire tribe of hominids. Second, the caves that do exist, they were already occupied by things that would absolutely tear you apart. We are talking about the Pleistocene epoch, the Ice Ages. If you walked into a deep, dry cave in Europe during the Ice Age looking for a place to nap, you weren't finding a home. You were delivering Uber Eats to a terrifying apex predator. Cave bears, for example, were not just big bears. They weighed up to 2,000 pounds. They could stand 11 feet tall on their hind legs. There were giant hyenas, dire wolves, and European Ice Age leopards. A cave is a localized, highly contested resource. A squishy, clawless, upright primate does not just walk into a cave and evict a 2,000-pound bear. So why do we associate ancient humans with caves? Preservation bias. If you leave a bone out in the open savanna, the sun bakes it, the hyenas crush it for marrow, and the seasonal rains wash the fragments away. It's gone in a decade. But if you leave a bone in a dry, protected, temperature-controlled limestone cave, it sits there perfectly preserved for 50,000 years until an archaeologist with a tiny brush finds it and says, aha, they lived in caves. They didn't. They just occasionally died in them. Or they used them for temporary shelter during brutal winter storms. Or they used them as sacred sites to paint on the walls. The cave wasn't the house. It was the museum. It was the panic room. For 99% of human history, your ancestors slept outside, completely exposed to a world that wanted to eat them. So, if not caves, where? To answer that, we have to go back further. Before Homo sapiens, before we even looked human, we have to look at what every other great ape does right now. Look at chimpanzees, look at gorillas, look at orangutans. They don't sleep on the ground. And they don't just drape themselves over a branch like a wet towel hoping they don't fall. They build beds. Every single night, a chimpanzee spends about 10 to 15 minutes bending branches, weaving leaves, and creating a highly sophisticated, bowl-shaped nest high up in the canopy. It takes real skill. It takes engineering. Young chimps literally have to be taught how to do it by their mothers. They choose specific trees with specific tensile strength. They build a custom bug-resistant orthopedic mattress 40 feet in the air. Why? Because the ground is where you die. The ground is where the leopards hunt. Our earliest ancestors, like Australopithecus, the famous Lucy skeleton from 3.2 million years ago, almost certainly did the exact same thing. Their skeletal structure tells us they walked on two legs during the day, but their shoulders and long curved fingers show they were still perfectly adapted for climbing. When the sun set, they abandoned the ground. They climbed back into the canopy. The tree was the ultimate fortress. It kept you out of the line of sight of terrestrial predators. But there was a massive evolutionary catch. Sleeping in a tree fundamentally limits how deeply you can sleep. If you fall into a deep, paralytic REM sleep while balanced on a branch 50 feet up, you fall, and gravity doesn't care if you're dreaming. So tree-sleeping primates sleep lightly. They wake up constantly. Their sleep is fragmented, continuously interrupted by the need to adjust their grip, balance their weight, or check their surroundings for tree-climbing snakes and leopards. To get smarter, to grow the massive, energy-hungry brain that eventually defined human beings, we needed deeper, uninterrupted sleep. REM sleep is where the brain clears neurotoxins, consolidates complex memories, and builds dense neural networks. You cannot build a human brain on primate sleep. We needed to come down from the trees, but coming down meant sleeping on the ground, the single most dangerous place on planet Earth. Around 2 million years ago, a massive shift happened. Homo erectus appeared on the evolutionary stage. They were taller, they had longer legs, they were built for walking and running vast distances across the open plains, but their bodies changed in another critical, terrifying way. Their shoulders, arms, and hands were no longer optimized for climbing. They couldn't scramble up a tree fast enough to escape a lion if their life depended on it. Homo erectus committed to the ground, permanently, day and night. Think about the absolute insanity of this evolutionary move. You are taking a soft, slow, clawless, relatively weak primate, removing its ability to climb trees, and telling it to sleep on the ground in a world populated by saber-toothed cats, massive packs of giant hyenas, and predators that we don't even have modern equivalents for. It is a suicide mission. These predators were perfectly adapted for the dark. They had a tapetum lucidum, that reflective layer in the back of the eye that gives animals night vision. They could see in the pitch black. Humans cannot. When the sun goes down, we are functionally blind. We are just slow meat waiting in the dark. For hundreds of thousands of years, the night must have been an absolute theater of terror. You survived by hiding in thick brush, staying dead silent, and hoping the wind didn't carry your scent to a hunting pack of Homotherium, unless you had a secret weapon, and eventually, we got one: fire. Fire is the absolute boundary line between humans and everything else in the animal kingdom. It is the original security system. When humans finally learned to control fire, with evidence from places like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa dating back a staggering 1 million years, they didn't just get a way to cook meat, they got a portable sun, they got a force field. Every land animal on Earth is biologically hardwired to fear fire. It is an ancient, deeply embedded instinct that supersedes hunger. Animals that ran from the smell of smoke survived wildfires. Animals that didn't burned to ash. The fear of fire is literally coded into their DNA. So when early humans started building campfires, they created a zone of absolute terror for predators. A lion might stalk a human in the dark. It might be starving, it might be desperate, but it will not cross a ring of glowing, popping embers. It just won't. The evolutionary math in its brain says the risk isn't worth it. Fire completely changed the architecture of human sleep. You didn't need a tree anymore. You didn't need a cave. You just needed dry wood and a spark. The fire became the wall. But fire alone isn't enough. A fire can go out. A fire needs fuel. If you're asleep, who keeps the fire burning? This brings us to one of the most brilliant, invisible, and overlooked survival strategies in human history, the Sentinel hypothesis. If you look at how modern hunter-gatherer tribes sleep today, like the Hadza in Tanzania or the San in Namibia, they never sleep alone. Never. They sleep in groups, usually clustered around multiple small fires. And here is the fascinating part. They don't all sleep at the same time. Researchers from the University of Toronto wanted to understand this. They strapped advanced sleep monitors to the wrists of 33 Hadza hunter-gatherers for 20 days. They wanted to see what a completely natural, pre-industrial human sleep cycle actually looked like. What they found blew their minds. Out of those 20 days, totaling over 220 hours of recorded sleep time, there were exactly 18 minutes where every single adult was asleep at the same time. 18 minutes. That means for 99.8% of the night, at least one person was awake. And nobody planned it. There was no guard schedule written on a rock. There was no night watchman assigned by a chief to keep the fire going. It happened completely naturally, and it happened because of genetic variation in human chronotypes. You know how some people are naturally morning larks who pop out of bed at 5 a.m. with annoying amounts of energy, and other people are extreme night owls who can't even think about falling asleep until 2 a.m. In the modern world, we treat night owls like they're lazy or broken. We force everyone into a rigid 9-to-5 schedule and act like anyone who naturally stays up late is somehow failing at life. But in a hunter-gatherer society, the night owl is the hero. The night owl is keeping everyone alive. The teenagers and young adults naturally stay up late. They talk, they tend the fire, they keep watch. By the time they finally get tired and go to sleep around 3 a.m., the older adults, the elders of the tribe who naturally wake up incredibly early, are already stirring. They take over the unconscious shift. The tribe is never defenseless. There is always a brain online. There is always a pair of eyes scanning the darkness. There is always a hand ready to throw another log on the fire. Your chronotype, whether you are a morning person or a night person, is not a character flaw. It is an ancient biological defense mechanism. You are literally carrying the sleep schedule of a prehistoric guard. So we have the ground, we have the fire, and we have the social watch. But you still can't just lie down on the bare dirt. The dirt is cold, it drains your body heat, and it is crawling with insects, ticks, and parasites that carry disease. Did our ancestors just sleep in the mud? Absolutely not. At a site called Border Cave in South Africa, archaeologists dug down into the dirt and found something astonishing. Dating back over 200,000 years, they found the remains of prehistoric beds. These weren't just piles of leaves. These were highly engineered mattresses. The people living there had gone out and harvested specific types of broad-leafed grasses, like Panicum maximum, but they didn't just throw the grass on the ground. First, they laid down a thick layer of white ash, and then they put the grass on top of the ash. Why ash? Because ash is a mechanical insecticide, it is incredibly abrasive on a microscopic level. It physically cuts into the exoskeletons of ticks, mites, and bedbugs, and dehydrates them to death. Insects cannot crawl through a layer of ash. So 200,000 years ago, ancient humans were building elevated, insulated, pest-proof orthopedic mattresses, and when the grass got old or infested, they just burned it, creating a new layer of protective ash, and laid fresh grass on top. They were practicing advanced pest control and hygiene hundreds of thousands of years before the invention of soap. But you still need physical protection from the elements. Wind, freezing rain, and snow will kill you just as fast as a leopard. If they weren't sleeping in caves, what were they building? The answer is ephemeral architecture. Temporary, brilliant, biodegradable structures. Ancient humans were nomadic. They followed the massive herds of game. They followed the changing seasons. You can't carry a brick house with you, and you don't want to spend a month building something permanent if you're leaving in a week. Archaeologists have found the ghost outlines of these structures all over the world. At a site called Terra Amata in southern France, dating back nearly 400,000 years, researchers found oval arrangements of stones on an ancient beach. In the center of these ovals were ash deposits from hearths, and around the edges were post holes, places where thick wooden branches had been driven deep into the dirt. They were building huts 400,000 years ago, long before our specific species Homo sapiens even existed. Earlier humans were building beach houses on the French Riviera. They would take heavy branches, lean them together into a dome or a teepee shape, and cover the frame with animal hides, woven grass, or thick brush. It's the exact same architectural technology used by the Apache to build wickiups, or the Sand People to build grass huts. These structures were ingenious. They took a tribe maybe a few hours to build. They blocked the wind, they trapped the radiant heat from the fire, and when the tribe needed to move on, they simply abandoned the heavy wooden frame, taking only the precious, perfectly tanned animal hides with them. The wood eventually rotted away, leaving nothing but a circle of stones for archaeologists to puzzle over thousands of years later. Further north, in places like Ukraine, where there were no trees during the Ice Age, Neanderthals and early modern humans built massive, complex huts entirely out of mammoth bones. At a site called Mezherich, archaeologists found a hut made from 149 individual mammoth bones, carefully interlocked and covered in furs. It weighed tons. It took a massive, coordinated community effort to build. These people were not primitive scavengers huddled in the rain. They were architects. They were engineers. They were adapting to every environment on Earth. But sleeping outside, even with a fire, a grass mattress, and a bone hut, does something profound to your psychology. When the sun goes down in the wilderness, the world shrinks. You cannot see past the edge of the firelight. The darkness becomes an absolute physical presence pressing in on you from all sides. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the dry grass is instantly amplified. Your senses are dialed to maximum alert. This is why human beings to this day are afraid of the dark. It is not an irrational childhood phobia that you are supposed to just outgrow. It is a deeply rational evolutionary response to the fact that for 2.9 million years, the dark was full of teeth. A child afraid of the dark is just a child with good survival instincts, but the firelight provided something else. It provided a stage. Think about the modern day. What do you do when you're sitting around a campfire with your friends? You don't do your taxes. You don't analyze spreadsheets. You stare into the flames and you talk. Anthropologist Polly Weisner spent decades studying the Juhansi people of the Kalahari Desert. She recorded exactly what they talked about during the day and exactly what they talked about at night. During the day, 81% of the conversation was practical. It was economic complaints, hunting strategies, who didn't share their food fairly, who was annoying who, gossip. It was the prehistoric equivalent of office politics. But at night, around the fire, the entire tone changed. 81% of the conversation shifted to storytelling. They told myths, they told legends of their ancestors doing impossible things, they sang songs, they explained the movements of the stars. Because when you are huddled together in the dark, staring at the only light source for miles, you need to feel connected. Storytelling was the glue that bound the tribe together. It synchronized their brains. It built a shared reality. You didn't just sleep next to these people. You shared a spiritual universe with them. The campfire was the first theater. It was the first church. It was the first internet. It was where human culture was actually born, and it happened every single night before they closed their eyes. And when they did finally close their eyes, they didn't sleep the way you do. The modern expectation of sleep is incredibly rigid. You get into bed at 11 p.m., you close your eyes, and you are expected to remain completely unconscious for 8 solid hours until an alarm screams at you in the morning. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you panic. You think you have insomnia. You stare at the ceiling, doing the math on how tired you're going to be at work tomorrow, which only makes you more stressed, which keeps you awake longer. Ancient humans would look at you like you were insane. For almost all of human history, people practiced biphasic sleep, segmented sleep. They went to sleep shortly after the sun went down. They slept for about 4 hours, and then, in the middle of the night, around 1 or 2 a.m., they woke up. And they stayed awake for an hour or two. This wasn't insomnia. This was the watch period. The fire needed tending. Someone might need to check the perimeter. People would quietly talk, or smoke, or just lie there in the dark, thinking. It was a period of deep, peaceful reflection. The brain during this middle-of-the-night waking period is flooded with prolactin, a hormone that promotes a state of calm and relaxation. Then, after an hour or two of wakefulness, they would go back to sleep for another 4 hours until dawn. First sleep and second sleep. This was the standard human operating procedure worldwide. We have historical records of it from medieval Europe, from ancient Rome, from indigenous tribes across the Americas. In the 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware conducted an experiment where he placed modern humans in darkness for 14 hours a day, simulating a prehistoric winter. Within a few weeks, their sleep patterns completely shifted. They stopped sleeping in one 8-hour block and naturally reverted to biphasic sleep. First sleep, an hour of quiet wakefulness. Second sleep. It wasn't until the invention of artificial lighting, gas lamps and eventually light bulbs that we pushed our bedtime later and later, compressing our sleep into one solid, unnatural 8-hour block to fit the demands of the Industrial Revolution. You are stressing out over waking up at 3 a.m. because a light bulb invented 150 years ago told you it was wrong. Your biology is just trying to do what it has done for 300,000 years. It's trying to tend the fire. It's trying to give you a moment of peace. So let's completely reconstruct the reality of ancient sleep. Forget the cave. Forget the damp, dark, isolated rock. You are sleeping in a temporary, beautifully woven brush hut, or perhaps right out under the stars on a mattress of pest-repellent grass. You are surrounded by your entire extended family, a tribe of people who know you intimately and who would literally die for you. In the center of your camp is a fire, a glowing beacon that holds the darkness and the predators at bay. The air smells like wood smoke and dry earth. You fall asleep listening to the rhythm of someone telling a story your grandfather told, and his grandfather before him. You wake up in the middle of the night, throw a log on the embers, look up at a sky absolutely choked with stars, totally free of light pollution, and then drift peacefully back to sleep. You don't have to wake up for work. You just wake up when the sun tells you to. Now look at us. We have conquered the night. We have eradicated the predators. We live in climate-controlled boxes made of steel and concrete. We have locks on our doors and alarm systems on our windows. We are safer than any human being in the history of the planet, and yet we are exhausted. We lie in our perfectly safe, perfectly dark, perfectly quiet bedrooms, and we can't sleep. We stare at glowing rectangles that flood our brains with synthetic anxiety. We take pills to force our bodies into unconsciousness so we can be productive for a corporation the next day. We sleep isolated, separated from our families and our tribe by walls and distances. We have traded the physical danger of the savannah for the psychological torment of the modern world. We built the ultimate fortress. We finally got the absolute security our ancestors fought and died for, and in the process we completely forgot how to sleep. You don't need a softer mattress. You don't need a better sleep app. You are a primal creature, biologically wired to sleep under the stars, guarded by a fire, surrounded by a tribe. You're not broken, you're just profoundly homesick for a world that doesn't exist anymore.